so nervous.
Hope he says yes.
Hello?
Wayne?
What's up?
Hey, Wayne. This is John, Jeremy, and Jason Chapman.
All on one call.
All right. All three of the JCs.
We're great.
Thanks,
Jeremy has something to ask you since he's a mandolin player.
Will you be my friend? All right. Second question. Will you be on our podcast?
Yeah, you know I will.
All right. That'd be awesome.
Sweet. All right. Let's sit down and talk about things.
You remember that time that you played that really cool lick? That was so cool.
Yeah, that one time, that must have been like 97.
I look forward to it, man. It's going to be fun.
It will be fun.
All right. We'll see you then.
Okay, pal. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take me away, 'cause I can be the link. Let somebody run, let it go, and I can't have my way.
It's good to be seated with you three gentlemen here at the table one more time.
You sound so official.
I know. Well, I wanted to do it in a more professional manner.
The gentleman to the left has the floor.
The gentleman from North Carolina.
Will you yield, sir? I ask, will you yield?
Blah, blah, blah. That's what it is now. Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, 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 blah. Guys, it's good to see you again.
You can't use that.
I was just saying it's a good blog if you would like to read about the law blog of blah, blah, blah. He's a great writer on law.
Yeah, all things law.
And he's a good blogger.
Anyway,
We like Arrested Development.
podcasting,
Jason,
am I right?
Yeah, I think this is the thing, guys. I'm having fun with it. I hope the audience is. They seem to be responding well. And even if they're not, even if nobody's listening, and most of those views are probably me,
Well,
I love getting to know some of the people we thought we knew a
It's
little
good
better.
you say that because nobody's listening. The numbers are in.
The numbers are in.
And,
They all get traced back to one IP address, and it's me listening to the same podcasting.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about that person that I knew.
Do you think anybody tunes into a podcast where everybody just kind of clears their throat through the entire thing, like? No, but there's a lot of editing, some breathing out of these episodes.
Really?
Is it from me? Yeah, pretty much.
Well,
I
there
didn't
you
wanna
go,
say
audience.
anything, but-
You're welcome for that. That will not be edited out. That's part of the episode.
This part is this episode, but yeah. No,
Anyway,
in the other episodes.
who do we have as a guest today, guys?
We have Mr. Wayne Benson. You
My
know him.
hero.
Yeah, you know him, the creator of every lick you've ever tried to play. And failed.
The originator.
Every failed lick Jeremy's ever tried.
I like to call him
Every single
Sir
butchered
Benson.
lick that Jeremy has done. It came from Wayne.
Thank
Wayne
you,
Benson, one of our heroes. One of the guys, he was in the band that basically influenced everything we did from the early 90s to the mid 2000s. We wanted to be them. We wanted to follow them around the campgrounds. And
We did follow them.
yeah, we were like little kids bugging the
I think
heck out
they
of
had a
them.
restraining order for a little while, but
It's okay. We got over that. We figured it out.
we worked loopholes.
So he's got this new channel that he's doing called Wayne's World. And I actually saw somebody asking,
Wayne's
best
World
places.
Mandolin. I think he's going to have to.
Is it say
Otherwise,
that? Yeah,
I think so.
it just says Wayne's World, I think. And somebody put out, best places to learn mandolin. And it was in there, Wayne's World. I thought it was a joke at the first, and then it dawned on me. I remember, Wayne Benson is. And I think that's genius because I am a fan of Wayne. We should ask him about Wayne's World.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he watches the movie?
Party on.
I feel like Garth right now.
I assume he knows how to party on. Anyway,
I'm really excited to talk to Wayne and let him know how much I appreciated stealing all of his licks and that I probably owe him some royalties
And
for.
I apologize for ruining them all.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
he's got to understand.
Well,
It was the heart. It was what I meant to do with the
the
licks.
intent is all that really matters. Anyway,
Let's
Mr.
let Wayne
Wayne
Benson on the show. will
Mr.
we?
Wayne,
Wayne.
Mr. Wayne
Benson.
Benson.
All right, guys, we're real excited to have another Acoustic Shoppe Knows People episode with one of my favorite people, one of my mandolin heroes from way back when I was stealing everybody's licks. I probably stole, I'd say, almost more of his solos and licks than just about any mandolin player, which I need to apologize for doing that, or at least send a royalty. A poor representation. But Wayne Benson, very excited to have Wayne Benson on the episode today.
Wayne Benson of Third Time Out and Wayne's World. It is good to have you on the show here today.
Man, it's great to be with you guys. I appreciate it.
We spent many years together doing. There was a time period when we would probably see you almost at least one time every single week on the road at some show. We would somehow be out there, and then we weren't asked to play those shows anymore.
Right. Man, I do.
It was all the time with Third Time Out.
I remember those days so well, man, because it was really kind of like a heyday for bluegrass at that point. You know, and we were all obviously a lot younger. I thought of you guys this past week at Poppy Mountain, because I remember us being there, which was actually Rudy Fest, you know, that is they have at that same location. And they still have Poppy Mountain. That festival's still ongoing, and we just did a benefit at that same location. So we're going to play that same venue 3 times this year. But I'm in that place career-wise where I just look back on so many things. The Third Time Out's in its 33rd year as a band. Wow. 32nd year as a band. But like Poppy Mountain and those places, man, once I did, you know, we used to host that festival. We would get there like on Monday and not leave until Sunday. Mm-hmm. And I did and that went on for like the bigger part of 10 years, I think, that we were the host. And anyway, I did the math one time on how much time I spent on that hill. It was a little bit depressing thinking back to it in that way. And it's the same way with all these other venues. Like if I counted up how much time I spent at the Executive Inn in Owensboro, Kentucky. I've lived there for like 3 months, you know, just from all the years of IBMA added up together. Yeah.
If only they had a punch card of some kind that you
right.
capitalize on.
You get one night
free.
By the way, when it was Poppy Mountain, the Third Time Out Festival, also known as one of the wildest festivals.
Not originally. I think it just slowly progressed that way, but it got pretty crazy. And
a lot of
might have led to a few deaths on golf carts.
I don't even think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Wayne, but I don't think you were part of most of the chaos that would happen there. But those folks were wild. I mean, wild.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, you know, like walking back to the bus from certain locations, you probably want to have somebody with you.
I remember when we went and played Poppy Mountain, because like I said, we played a lot together, and the Chapmans were very closely entwined with Third Time Out between Ray Deaton and Russell and your entire group of folks. We were all a very tight unit, and we worked together. We did shows.
We wanted to be Third Time Out for
that was what we were trying to be.
We idolized you guys so much that we got to hang out with you. It was very fortunate, but
it was very awesome.
We were around you a lot.
Where I was coming with this is, Dad had a rule at Poppy Mountain, which was when the sun went down, we had to all be in a unit and not very far from the vehicle.
I never went far from the stage. I stayed close to backstage.
There was one year that we were one campsite where they were making moonshine in a radiator of a vehicle, like they were using that to distill their moonshine. So it was it was an interesting festival, but let's go back before that.
Get her done. Yeah.
That has nothing to do with Wayne, but
keeping it real kind of festival, right?
Definitely keeping it real.
We got to talk to Kristen on an episode, and we were she was mentioning that one of the things that got her inspired to play banjo was Scott Vestal, which also was pretty instrumental in you getting on your first band. Is that correct?
That's true. Yeah, the first professional band that I was ever in was with Scott Vestal with that group called Livewire that I'm sure you're
love the one album I think you guys put out.
Yeah, one record, one and done for that band. We had the deck was kind of stacked against us as far as we all lived from each other. We had Ernie on Long Island up in New York,
really?
And then
I didn't
Robert Hale in West Virginia. Myself at the time, I still lived with my parents. I was 19 years old, and I was near Charlotte, North Carolina, and then Scott was all the way down in Atlanta. So it was tough, you know, trying to get together or to find work where you could really, you know, realize any money at the end of the day, just on expenses for everybody to get there. But it was a really fun band. I was totally in. man, I was in over my head to be in that group, which is, I mean, the ultimate place to be to learn, to go ahead and bite off more than you can chew, because you learn a lot like that. But again, me being an old guy, looking back on all that, when I was 16, 17 years old, and would be in jam sessions like over at Denton, North Carolina with Scott Vestal and Russell Moore, I had no idea that was going to lead, and just unfold into the career that I've had. Could go back to just being in love with bluegrass as a kid and doing what everybody does and getting out in the parking lot and playing until daylight. And those guys were still, I mean, really young at that time too.
Sure.
I think Russell is 5 years older than me. And if I'm not mistaken, Scott's just a few, maybe 3 years older than him, something like that.
Yeah. And then those guys, obviously, they went on to play with Doyle Lawson, and then that eventually led to the third time out. And it's kind of cool how all these different pieces kind of came together, and you've been a part of those floating around. I know throughout the years, I already admitted how much of your stuff I stole. Part of it was that series you did with Scott Vestal, on Pine Castle Records, the Bluegrass 95, 7, all the way through the 2000s. Before then, I think I was just doing a lot of the Bluegrass standard vocal tunes, and I didn't learn many fiddle tunes. And then you guys put that series of albums out of all these fiddle tunes, and I would just eat those up, instrumentals, and I would just eat those up and steal as many solos and licks of those as I possibly could. And that was really cool.
So what we're saying is Scott Vestal is.
Can you ask him if he'll be on the podcast?
Man, I have to say, those records I would have never thought would have been something that was getting talked about, nearly 30 years later when we made those. They were so loose. And the whole way, I always like to put this out there because it's the truth. That first album was not conceived to be Bluegrass 95. That was a Clay Jones instrumental record. And and then he, ended up not playing. He wasn't traveling anymore to play, and that's your number one way to move product in 1995. So rather than just the record never come out, if I'm not mistaken, David Parmley, he had produced that album. He had the idea. He said, just call it Bluegrass 95 because we've got mandolin intros, banjo intros. It doesn't necessarily sound like a guitar album. It features all this other stuff. Yeah. And that's how that entire system, that was the springboard that started it. And then it was, we just get together and rehearse the day before we were going to record. And then, we'd start playing and everybody's talking about where we're going to eat Mexican food for lunch. It was really like that, which is, I think, is always the best, kind of formula when we tried to come up with arrangements on the stuff that made it a little bit different or have its own identity. But for the most part, those are kind of like jam session records.
Yeah. Well, some of the most influential albums in our industry were that way. The Bluegrass album was pretty much the same idea, a project that just needed to fill out a contract, deal that Tony just puts together and says, hey, let's get together and we'll just make this album and we'll get it going and becomes, this, it's everybody's Bible for how to learn, bluegrass. It was the same thing for that series. It was, it became, we got to have this. If you're going to play bluegrass and you're a mandolin or a banjo or a guitar player, this is the stuff you need to learn. And, now you're part of that. So cool.
Well, I would say that it's really weird that you would segue from talking about those records into the Bluegrass album band, because that seems like two different conversations to me. But man, as far as the Bluegrass album band, you're exactly right, man. And we owe it to all those guys that they played with such integrity and served the song, because it's a perfect point of reference for your musicianship. We have a lot of young players out there now that I don't think have discovered those records, and it shows in their approach.
Well, I know you're having a hard time matching that. But I think that series that you guys did, I will tell you for a fact, for a guy like me who was coming up, that slightly behind you guys. That was the way obviously the Bluegrass Album Band, that's our root stuff. That's, the music that we all go, when I think Bluegrass, this is the stuff I want to be able to do. But when it came to Bluegrass instrumentals and how the music was being formed in that mid 90s time period, for guys like me, I know for Jeremy, Jason, we were that next bunch crop coming up right behind you. That's what we did. I can tell you that for a fact. So you may not acknowledge it, but it was definitely a major influence on all of us. So congrats for that.
And that's what I was saying, beginning of this part of the conversation, it blows me away. Like Justin Haynes, that was fiddle player in this band forever. He was one of the first musicians I ever worked with that really made me feel like an old guy. and he would talk about those records and say, man, that's a part of my childhood is the way he would put it. So it is crazy to think that you were a part of something that anybody could have even come close to, having that kind of a relationship with the music, because I know what albums mean to me. If you like the Tony Rice record, Cold on the Shoulder, and I've
my favorite, by the way.
It's a hard record to clean after. I mean, you get that JD Crowe fix as part. It's got everything is in there. Everything. And like for me, at 3:00 in the morning, drinking coffee and trying to get home, if I turn that record on, I literally don't feel like I'm alone in the car. It's like that's your buddy that's been with you since, 1985, whenever 84, when it came out. That's the relationship. And so many people, I think, are never going to really know that, the way we stream music and download it.
Switch genres and switch bands.
True. I can still see myself, by the way. That album for me is, we were talking about that capo that I have. I have it serialized, Tony Rice model capo, and it's serialized for that album. And to me, it was the most. But I remember sitting in my bed with the actual album cover and just reading it over and over. I read that album cover, I guarantee you, over and over. And at that time, probably had it all memorized. But every time I'd listen to it, I'd bring out that album jacket and read it again while I was doing it. And we had these relationships with those albums that were different than, like you said, than a lot of people have today.
And Wayne's been a part of that for us too.
Yeah.
More than just the Bluegrass 90s. The third time out
Young
stuff.
Mandolin Monsters. That was another
Mandolin
one.
Monsters. That's more Jeremy's jam.
Remember that one?
Yeah. No, but third time out really was that for us also.
Absolutely.
I can't, the amount of hours we sat listening to those third time out records while we traveled in the van, going back to, Grandpa's Mandolin. That was your first record. Is that correct?
That was the first one that I played on, was Grandpa's Mandolin. That was the last record that the band recorded with Rebel.
And then it was Letter to Home after that, I believe.
Yeah, actually, there was a New Haven recording project. There was a gospel record called Across the Miles that we did that ended up being out of print and all that. And then when we made the gospel record that we did on Rounder was basically all those, I think it was 10 of the same songs. And then we recorded 2 different ones or whatever. But that was Letter to Home was the first record that we did on Rounder. It was. And again, it's really hard for me to believe that those recordings would be thought of by anyone as foundational to their playing.
Yeah. You want to talk about the Chapmans? It was like early on
for harmonies,
Osmond Brothers and Jim and
arrangements.
Jesse stuff, and then third time out, Letter to Home especially was like our. And that's why we got hooked up and following you guys at every festival, like little kids. Just
finally, Ray just got
everything.
tired of seeing us in the front row and took pity on us and said, "Hey, you guys need some help." Hey, kids,
Right.
And he helped us produce. And then, I know one of the coolest things. So Ray Deaton, who was the bass player at the time, ended up producing 2 albums for us. And including our first major release. And the best part about that was your whole entire crew was always part of that. Like, he'd play it for you. You guys gave ideas back to us, and we're always part of that growth of who we were as musicians. And again, I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for all that time that you guys spent on us. And it's amazing. You were bringing it up, that the idea of the musician who makes you feel old. And we're telling you this. This is who we grew up with. Your music. This is what we did. I remember Zach Arnold did the same thing for us when he came in here, and all of a sudden he's just like, "Hey, I want to play this song and this song." These are all all of our old Chapman's tunes that he's like, "Man, I grew up on all this." How weird is that experience, by the way? Well, the first time somebody starts doing that to you.
Yeah, it is, man. It's when things that people say, Noam Pikelny, when I was traveling with him, we always roomed together when I was in John Cowan's band. And I remember him saying that, like, if a Third Time Out record would come out and his parents would drive him around Chicago and find the record in a store or whatever, because this would have been before Amazon and before downloads and stuff like that. Sure. But to think that here's like a 9-year-old kid at the time, that wanted to hear that music, and he was into the Lonesome River Band and stuff like that. Again, really hard to believe that stuff, because it still seems like it's all too modern to me for anyone to look back on that way. Yeah. As far as the sound, it's hard to believe that 30 years have passed.
And that another thing, John was mentioning how supportive you guys were as a band, but also just the confidence booster that was for us individually to get asked up onto Third Time Out's bus, and you guys would all be friendly with us, and to the people that we looked up to for so long and listened to in our travels nonstop on a loop, that you guys would invite us on the bus and talk to us and hang and visit with us it was such a confidence booster, and I thank you directly for doing that. And it's so cool to get to know some of the people that are your heroes, and to have them be as cool and nice as you guys were to us is very thankful for that.
Oh, man, I appreciate it. It's like, what's really bad is when you get to know one of your heroes and they're an asshole.
It's happened too.
That's happened to me.
It's happened to all of us. Yeah. And it's amazing how it changes your entire relation. Yeah, Russell. Oh my God, that guy. No, just kidding. Make sure to tell him I said so. It is amazing how it changes your entire perception of their music. Yeah. Like, I have actually had people that I would listen to on a regular basis that I just thought were the greatest, and then you go in there and that one interaction just changed everything. And you have a hard time ever hearing their voice ever again.
You try not to let it affect it, but it just does.
That's right. And I'm never, like, you can catch anybody in a bad moment. And you know what it's like when you're playing, if it's 108 degrees outside and you're not having the best day of your life, and you talk to someone or whatever, and then you revisit that moment later that day and think, man, maybe I wasn't the nicest guy, 2 hours ago when we got off stage or whatever. So I would give anybody the benefit of the doubt on stuff like that. But if you really are around someone long enough to kind of, get this overall bad vibe, unfortunately, it can, negatively affect how much you like what they do.
I think it's something that we should all pay attention. I don't know if I've told you guys this, or my wife, I guarantee you, has told. We had run when I met my wife for the very first time, I honestly don't even remember this at all.
She loves hearing.
She knows this too. She came and saw us at a show, and we were playing Dollywood, and those were the days of, I don't know if you guys ever had to do these, but it was 5 shows a day, hot sun, and, like I said, 100 degrees, and we're just rocking through shows and get them over with and then move on to the next one. And according to her, I was absolutely rude and was not a cool person at all in any way, shape, or form. And then somehow we ended up meeting up again later, and I was all right, I guess, at that point. But it's something we should probably pay attention to more than, or now.
Yeah. Man, in that situation that you're talking about will bring out the best in you if it's there. But yeah, I've definitely played, in those situations, especially as a teenager. Man, I used to play at this place in North Carolina called Tweetsea Railroad, where you did like 8 sets a day. And it was, I'm going to say they were like 25-minute shows or whatever, and you were playing under this pavilion, and it's a bunch of retirement age people with their grandkids, and they're all eating barbecue while you're on stage. And the set list was made out for you. You had to play Orange Blossom Special, Rocky Top,
all the faves,
Fox on the Run. I've done that gig, and it makes you appreciate when you don't have to. So I think everybody is supposed to do. I mean, and I don't want to sound like the old guy. Oh, you got to pay your dues, but there's a lot to be said for appreciating things in life if they don't come too early. Like success that's found too early by a lot of people, they're not able to handle it, or it turns them into a monster or something.
Yeah,
but when
or it may be hard to follow up with more successes after that, and it kind of plateaus too early.
Yeah, and everything in life is like that. Like if you have to work for it and wait for a while and premeditate it, I think a lot of times we appreciate it more when it does finally arrive.
That's why I'm still waiting to be successful.
Jeremy, I'm also waiting for you to be successful. I wish you would be successful.
Something I was thinking, when we've already talked about how just listening to your albums were influential in the Chapmans, I think one of the biggest things that is underrated is how well you guys manage a stage. Like, we would sit in the front row and watch you guys, and there was a confidence. I think in our touring before that, there was a lot of competition among bands, and they're all jump on stage with as much energy as you can. And we got to win the crowd, and we've got to keep them in their lawn chairs. We've got to beat everybody else. And then third time out, would walk out on stage, and Steve would just kind of like, hey, cuz. And there was this confidence that you guys all had, and a way of interacting with the fans that kind of put the fans at ease, and it made the show a lot more like you brought everybody onto the stage with you and just said, let's play some music together and have fun. And we really tried to pick up on that and try not to be that super intense band that's going to wow everybody with our speed and intensity, and just get up there and interact with the crowd as if they're friends. I thought that was so cool, the way you all seem to have your own personas on stage that way.
Yeah, and I think it was just because of the five of us collectively that it kind of came off that way. But everybody in that band would agree that we never intended to try to be a musician's musician. We knew who we were, and the people that would be interested in listening to us were not going to be Mark O'Connor, or anybody like that. So there's no sense trying to carry yourself that way, because none of us ever, I never felt like I was going to be a Sam Bush or a Doyle Lawson or a Ricky Skaggs. Those three names are probably the first that I'm going to, come forward with if I'm talking about who influenced me. And when you look at them, they were the same way. They just did the music that they liked and played it. And you can't be afraid to be yourself. That's what everybody falls in love with about bluegrass, is that it's not commercially conceived, and it's not overly competitive in its nature. The songs are about lost love and home and happiness and death, and real subjects, and
sure,
it's easy to get too far removed from that, man. When you go back and listen to the Stanley Brothers or Flatt and Scruggs or Bill Monroe, listen to those songs. That's what people want to relate to.
Yeah, I had this conversation actually today with Liz, who is our one of our technicians here at the shop, and she was out playing a gig, and she said, you know how much easier it is when I just go out there and I just play music, and I'm not all concerned about all the details and all the little things that most of the people don't really care about all that much. I just get to do the songs. I get to tell the stories. I get to just do it my way. And I think that was what you were kind of hinting at, or directly going after, which is that idea of, hey, if I just play who I am, some people may not like it, but at least I give them a chance to know who I am. And like you said, the music is already designed to be that. It's designed to be, home.
It's a funny conundrum that it goes in a lot of industries, but music especially, or entertainment. There's this confidence that comes with success and comfort that comes with success. And it's not a cocky confidence, but it's a confidence of, I am who I am. And we learned it later in life, but you guys definitely had it. And, we watch people like Marty Rabin, who, the confidence that comes from a person like that, or Third Time Out at the time especially, was just, it's a confidence in knowing I am who I am. Like you said, I am who I am. People are going to either love it or hate it, and that's not going to make a difference to me. I'm just going to be me, and that's great. And that it's a funny thing, because these bands that are coming up behind that with all this phonetic energy, and I have to succeed, and I have to get
encores and I have to do great and I have to be successful or I won't get another job. That comes across way too, I guess, needy. And once you get to the level of success that they're trying to reach, then you slow down and realize I don't have to be that. So it's a kind of a weird conundrum I've seen with bands where it's like screaming and running, dancing, and we went through it. Yeah, really hard. But we learned the hard way. Yeah. I don't know. Music is a lot of fun. It should be fun. You have definitely made sure it's fun, and now you've got Wayne's World of Mandolin instruction. Besides doing just the performance stuff, you are doing a lot of teaching nowadays. How has that changed you as a musician?
Oh man, it's probably not probably as far as being an improvisational musician, it's definitely made me overthink everything, because it's a real blessing to teach. Don't get me wrong, but like when you're when you've got brand new students that are unaware of these massive concepts, if it's the chord scale or modal approach or whatever it is, and you talk about those things over and over and over, you really know it and you're really connected to the fretboard the way you should be. But then it's really easy to get caught up in thinking about all of that instead of just playing in the moment. So that would be the one negative that comes from it. But it's what it's really done that's so cool is it's reminded me of why I fell in love with the mandolin in the first place, because you get to see that brand new energy in people that are just discovering bluegrass. And that doesn't have to be a 15-year-old like, myself starting out on, which I'd played guitar from my childhood, but really got into mandolin as a sophomore in high school. And when I see other people that age that are getting into it, I can just kind of imagine what that pathway is going to be. It's rather they do it as a career or if it's just something that they have a passion for. And it's like music provides a therapy for me. My relationship with my mandolin is a lot of different things. And again, at this age, like looking back, the fact that I really fell in love with Boone Creek and with Ricky Skaggs and just that sound of his mandolin and that attitude that band played with, I loved it so much. And I'm not a guy that's really ever had a plan. Everything in my life is just kind of unfolded because I love that one thing and I wanted to play. Everybody that I've met, the bands that I've been in, where I've lived through the, different seasons of my life, all of that has totally been because of mandolin. So it gives you, its teaching is bigger than what you have in front of you in terms of teaching, because that music is potentially going to be the guiding point or the point of reference for everything that might happen to someone, because that's what music is to me. It's totally a way of life. It's way bigger than earning a living or, trying to come up with different ways to monetize what you do. It really is everything. So you want to handle that with a lot of care when you're teaching someone. It's bigger than what it feels like it is.
Yeah, that's a great point to keep in mind. We've talked about this before. We're looking into our personal lives. I can't think of many substantial relationships that I have right now that aren't somehow music related, that I didn't meet that person through music or I don't interact with them through music. It becomes like you said, the guiding force in your life once you really get kind of involved in music. And following you, and you can correct me some on this, but it seemed like when you were playing before, and I think a lot of bluegrass musicians do this, where a lot of it's playing by ear training, listening to somebody play, and then kind of emulating that. I saw, and this may or may not be true, but it felt like I saw a big transition to where your understanding of the mandolin and some of the theory really took off when you took a break from Third Time Out and went to work with Cowan. Is that true, or was that just kind of me injecting that into what really happened? But it seemed like all of a sudden your approach to mandolin changed a little bit when you were back with Third Time Out.
It definitely did. During the season of playing with John, being around improvisational players like Jeff Autry or Noam Picowney, Shad Cobb and Luke Bulla, again, totally in over my head to be playing with guys like that. And it created an ambition to learn more about how improvisational playing works and learn some swing standards and to a better understanding of scales, modes, being able to arpeggiate chord progressions and things like that, that you don't really have to think like that as a bluegrass player. But at the same time, I was still a young enough player at that point that I hadn't matured as far as trying to serve the song. I feel like any of the recordings that I played on with Third Time Out after I had been with John, I'm playing more melody and serve the song better. So I feel like I grew in every, possible direction. But as far as a shift in the way I think about the fretboard, that all came from when Kristen and I, after we got married, it's like all your stuff gets combined. All of a sudden your record collection's twice as big. But in our case, it was basically that we had 2 copies of all the same albums because we liked the same stuff. But Kristen had these Bela Fleck instructional cassette tapes. And just to have something to do in the car driving from Nashville to Atlanta, I would listen to these instructional tapes. And he's like playing like an interval exercise or whatever over a scale and talking about how this leads into a modal application of the scale. And I'm driving along and thinking, man, I don't understand any of this, And so I started trying to kind of transpose what I was hearing him talk about, because he is, if not one of my favorite improvisational musicians of all time. It's amazing the way he could play in 1983. Nobody else has really, even accomplished that as far as banjo playing to me. He's just so far ahead of his time. But anyway, I started to, try to move some of those thoughts onto the fretboard of the mandolin. And then I had a theory book that I bought that was actually a piano book, but that was a good thing too, because I'd have to transpose all of that, to the fretboard of the mandolin. And it definitely has an impact on your playing, when you do that. And it's there's 2 ways to look at it. Once you ever drink the Kool-Aid on all that, you can never go back to being that. You can never go back to being that guy that just plays and does everything by ear, because once that creeps in, and maybe you could, but like teaching as much as I do, I'm always going to have an awareness of those things, and that they're right there under your nose all the time, even if you're not thinking about them.
Powerful stuff right there.
It's something that I think is a really cool thing that you've been able to, you just kind of articulated that it is always there in the back of your mind, but you were able to kind of mold those 2 different approaches to music, where a lot of, I'm still in that camp where I don't understand enough about the theory. I've learned a lot more about it from teaching, but definitely not to the level of what you were just describing with Bela's instruction. And I've had some great conversations with Bill Keith in the past where he would just talk to me and my eyes would just glaze over and I'd just kind of nod.
It takes about 8 seconds to be lost in a conversation with him, about theory,
But you were able to kind of take, and it's not like I saw a drastic change in your playing, like all of a sudden you just threw away all that stuff that had led you to that point, but it was almost a different approach to music that it seemed apparent. And I think a lot of that was that now you had that understanding of, I've been using these techniques by ear, that all this theory is embedded in that, but now I'm able to actually consciously anticipate this coming and adjust to it. And being able to bring your history of being ear, it almost seems like ear training would be a harder thing to teach somebody that is totally theory based than the opposite way, where somebody that has been playing by ear so long, once they learn to incorporate theory into it, then they can still use that ear training to use those tools a little bit better.
Yeah. And it totally depends on the individual. Some people can almost immediately learn something like that and then realize, don't take any of this too seriously. It's all about the process, like the process of going through all that develops your ear. There's a famous Charlie Parker quote that I should learn, but in a nutshell, he says, we all learn arpeggios, scales, modes and all these different devices so that we can forget about them and just play. You know, I always try to think of it like that you're, if you send someone a text message, you don't have to remind yourself what the letter T sounds like. It's fundamental. So all of those things like that you learn, you shouldn't be thinking about them. It should just be that you're able to invest, in music emotionally, because that's the stuff that we love.
I like it.
That's what we want to hear. I mean, you think about, you want to know all that, but at the same time, you want to play like Larry Sparks.
Yeah.
I think I heard a quote that you made once where somebody in one of your workshops, you were talking a lot of theory, and then they raised their hand and said, well, Bill Monroe never had to learn any of this. And I think you said something like, well, Bill Monroe was a genius and you're not Bill Monroe.
Yeah. Yeah, you get that a lot, and I mean, like because that's my bag as a teacher, and I'm not a fit for every person, and I've had people say, man, I don't want to learn, anything about theory, any of this stuff that you're talking about. I'm bluegrass. I'm the real thing. And I always say, okay, you live in a cabin, you work in a coal mine, you can see your
genre of music.
Yeah, you can see your mom's grave out behind your cabin. That's if you were true to all those things, man. I grew up, just a few blocks from a huge shopping mall. And I could ride my bike to a Burger King when I was a kid.
It was called the High Lonesome Center Strip.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, right at the end of the road that I grew up on, there's a laundromat and a Dairy Queen and a video arcade, in 1984. So none of those
ruined all of your authenticity. It is over, Wayne. You are done.
That's what. Hey, it's, bluegrass is just music that I heard, and I can relate to it as far as the values and stuff like that. But as far as growing up like that, and I always tell people that, and then there's the other side of it where I've had guys say, man, I don't want to learn any fiddle tunes or learn how to chop or, play out of chord positions. I just want to get right into bluegrass. What? I mean, what do you do with that attitude,
What? Speaking of great quotes, I want to say Wayne has had so many great quotes that have filled my entire life, but the one that will always show up.
I'm getting nervous now.
Every single jam session. I remember we were in a jam session just picking together in this circle, and I'm just sitting there just tuning. I'm like nervous. I'm freaking out. I'm tuning, and he just leans over and he goes, man, tuning's optional. That's my favorite quote of all time. Tuning is optional. From then on, that's how I've lived my life.
He took it to heart, unfortunately.
Okay. Man, I think that I was nervous there because I thought it was going to be a different quote.
We want to talk about
some
trophies
of those quotes too.
and some of those things that happen on the bus.
Yeah, I've got some of those too. We're not going to share those on a podcast. I promise so.
Jeremy, quick, give me a situation where somebody needs an instrument fast.
There is a band that's performing. You want to get backstage. You don't know how to get backstage, but you're a huge fan. So you grab a guitar, you walk backstage and say, hey, I got to get this to the lead singer. He needs it now.
All right, John, give me a situation quickly where they can get that guitar.
Well, here's the deal. You guys can go to theacousticshoppe.com and get on there. You can search for guitars. You can check by brand. You can check by style. All those different things. Order it. It will be shipped that day, if not the very next day.
Now give me a situation where they need a banjo.
There's no need for banjo. Everybody knows nobody needs a
But if you did need a banjo, you go to theacousticshoppe.com. Like John said, check us out, and thanks for supporting the podcast.
I can't think of a reason. Nobody has a reason for a banjo.
Dad.
So you've gone through a number of different mandolins in your history. What was your first mandolin when you started out, and then some of the progression? I remember when Tucker mandolins came out, you were one of the first guys playing with the Tucker mandolins, and then all the way through what you're playing now.
Well, the first mandolin would have been...
I want every single one of them, model number, serial number.
Man, the first thing would have been a little Harmony A model mandolin that was probably sold like in a Sears and Roebuck catalog or something. And there was a guy that my dad had a construction company eventually, but he was working on a construction crew when I was a kid. and somebody owed him $20 and gave him the mandolin because he didn't have any money. So that's kind of what got me started on mandolin.
What a great origin story right there. I'm talking about how much that impacted your life, and it was that transaction.
For sure. And then from there, I bought what was it? Brazos mandolin. There was a Japanese-made instrument or something as a teenager, and it was my first F5. I made enough money cutting grass over the summer to move into that. Then from there up to a Bob Shoe mandolin. I grew up about a block from a mandolin builder, which is really weird to have lived in Concord there in North Carolina. But
he also had at the mall and the Burger King and
that's right. Yeah.
The same.
We had it all. Yeah. So anyway, I had that, custom made mandolin. And then my first Gibson was a 1980 F5L mandolin that had originally belonged to Dewey Farmer, that a lot of people are familiar with his playing from back in the 70s with A.L. Wood and the Smoky Ridge Boys. So it felt, and he was a big influence on me as a teenager, so it felt really cool to own this mandolin that had originally belonged to him. I bought it from a guy named Clarence Green that was a very well-known regional player there in the Piedmont area of North Carolina. So at that was the mandolin that I played on the Grandpa's Mandolin record. It's on the cover of that album and everything. And the one before that, the Shoe mandolin, is what I was playing on the Livewire record. And then from there, you would pick up right where you were with the Tucker mandolins that I met Melvin, I think, in 1994, and started playing one of his F5s. And then he built for me a mandola that I've played for all these years. And then from there, Jim Triggs, I did an endorsement with him. He's a monster. And before that, there was actually Rigel mandolins that I did an endorsement with them at one point. Then Jim Triggs. And before the Triggs thing happened, I was actually able to buy, I have a 1926 Gibson mandolin that I acquired in September of 1998 was when I got that mandolin, which is a really big deal, to be blessed to own something like that. And I'm not kidding, guys. I lived like a gypsy to come up with the bread to buy that. Like all those years that we're talking about that we would see each other all the time, during that span for a couple of years, man, I didn't have a home or an apartment or anything like that. Everybody I knew was tired of seeing me lay on the couch, but that's what it took, and I wanted one of those mandolins and I knew that it would have an unbelievable impact on my playing, and also just what that does as far as other musicians that you really look up to have a reason to maybe take you a little more seriously or whatever if you own something like that. So anyway, that happened in 98, and then the Triggs endorsement, and then 2000 or 2001 was when the ball started rolling for the signature model mandolins that Gibson did. There was an Alan Bybee. They made 50 Alan Bybee mandolins and 50 Adam Steffies and 50 Benson signature models. And you can still get a Sam Bush model and maybe even a Doyle Lawson model, I think.
Yep.
So anyway, that, all those, it's wild that I can remember all that. I have most of this like the Benson model mandolins I've owned a bunch. Every time I see one of those, for sale, if I haven't owned it, I just automatically buy it. And I have a log book of like how they sound, because it probably sounds selfish, but I mean, like whichever one of those is the best of them, at some point I hope that it belongs to me,
Sure.
With it, being a signature model. And then I had swore that I would never do another endorsement or whatever. I just felt like I was done with that, and I was back to playing my old Gibson mandolin after playing the signature model Gibson stuff for a long time. And then Jonathan McClanahan, out of the blue, just called me. I was driving to Atlanta to meet the bus with Russell, And he said, cut to the chase pretty much. He said, I'd like to build an F5 for you. And I said, man, I appreciate the call, but I'm not, in the market for anything different to play. And his response, he said, let me build the mandolin and give it to you. And he said, if you don't play it on stage, then that's my fault that it wasn't good enough. And I thought, man, you can't beat that, that attitude. So he built it, and I've been playing it. I think it's working on 8 years that I've been playing Jonathan's stuff, and he is a world-class, builder, best dude you'll ever meet. And I buy a lot of mandolins, and, just to own them, because you don't really get a feel for what an instrument like that is unless you own it for a while. So, so I've had Don McCrosty stuff and those Ellis mandolins. Some of those are really fun to play. The Collings instruments, I've owned those. I had a Paganoni mandolin there for a while. I've got a Gilchrist, from the mid-90s that it's X-braced, and it's a hoss of a mandolin too. But that's one, again, in your life, I never saw myself as somebody that would buy that many mandolins and sell them or be comfortable with setup whatsoever. And then I just kind of grew into it.
Well, it's obvious that Wayne is a very passionate mandolin person. He's all the way into mandolins. He's got a good collection, and talks and stuff. I think that's pretty awesome. I really do.
Yeah, I think the one big take out of this is thinking all those things that you've talked about, owning these different mandolins, all the different people you've met along the way, how much, that one catalyst of picking up the guitar as a young kid and eventually getting into the mandolin, how the trajectory of your life is just completely centered around that, and all the people you meet and interact with, even to this day when you take on a new student. And I definitely encourage people, anybody really wanting to dive into mandolin, check out Wayne's World. He's got some great videos online, but also reach out to Wayne. I've been threatening to do it for years. I have to do it because I need to understand more of the theory behind it. And every time I've sat down with you, you've been excellent at explaining these concepts to me. It just takes me another 2 weeks to sit down and try to digest it and figure out how to actually put that into playing. But I am going to take some of your time and schedule some lessons with you.
Man, that'd be awesome. It'd be fun.
I absolutely agree. And go ahead and change my total approach to mandolin. I'll be one of those people that I'll take the red pill and just see how it changes my outlook on the way I play the mandolin.
Right. And you guys have a camp.
We did. We were going to, and Wayne's supposed to come back. If we do this again, we had Kristen at it. We talked to her on a previous episode. We had Kristen in here, and we talked about the camp, and we're going to get Wayne to get in and do it too. When that happens, it's going to be awesome because, again, if anybody has the experience to see both those two musicians as musicians, but also as teachers, it is a
and
very
individuals
powerful thing. Well, they're okay people too.
There you go.
No, it's a ton of fun. We got together at this IBMA this last time. We got to pick together. I absolutely, am in awe every time I see you as a player, as a, as like I said, the skills you both have as teachers knocks me out. I find myself, I do a lot of teaching. I do not do it to the level of either one of you, and it's pretty impressive to see that. I'm just blown away with it.
Yep. And the impact that Wayne's had on us musically can't be understated. And as a friend, it's been incredible. And we want to thank you for taking the time to do this.
Yeah.
Oh, this was a blast, man. Anytime. Like I was saying earlier, I really enjoy these podcasts with, even with guys that, people that you've known all your life or you've rubbed shoulders with throughout your career. To get to hear these podcasts, it's really cool. And it's important, man, what you guys are, this should all be archived. Think about how cool it would be if something like this, existed for the bluegrass musicians from the 60s and 70s that we all love, that it's kind of a mystery who they were. And anybody that knew those people they're all going away. So I think it's important that this kind of thing be captured. Recently, I put some video up on my channel of Third Time Out, playing at the Opry or something and that kind of thing. One of the musicians that Kristen had worked for that passed away, she found some videotape of them playing the Opry together with Larry Stevenson and made copies of it and sent it to his family, you would have thought they hit the lottery, man. I mean, stuff like this, it's important to archive what we do. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we've spent our entire lives dedicated to this music and what we want to do, and for that to all be in vain is pretty sad notion.
Yes.
And on a more personal level, because obviously there's the recordings and there's the music captured, but a lot of the fans, that's the only side of it they get. They get to maybe see the band on stage. They get to hear the recording over and over on streaming service or whatever, but getting to hear the stories of where you guys came from, or not just the standard interview question of, well, tell us the first time you owned an instrument, or that sort of thing, where it's more of a personal history. I think that is a very cool thing, and I kick myself that we don't have some of those stories, that we got to be a fly on the wall when the Osborne brothers were backstage talking about their big rise to fame and the giant folk music movement, and having some of those stories that weren't really captured in this type of format. I agree. It's a very cool thing to get to hear, and appreciate you being a part of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, man. I appreciate you guys.
We will definitely do it again. Next time we'll have even better stories and things to talk about, hopefully.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Wayne. We'll see you next time, buddy.
Yeah, pal. Y'all take care.
Yeah.
So there you were, talking to Wayne.
I was right here in this spot. Talking
right
Wayne.
there. You didn't move.
I'm surprised. I was kind of.
How do you feel?
I don't want to say I was disappointed, but I kind of expected when I said, "Hey, I've learned a lot of your licks," that he'd say, "Oh, yeah, I've learned a few of yours as well."
No, he was sitting there like, "Yeah, licks. I heard you."
But that's okay. I'm sure he'll get around to it.
I bet he will.
I'm going to send him a few selections from my collection that he can.
It's like
incorporate
into his
collection.
Jeremy's collection is 3.5 pages. It's just
if it isn't a Wayne Benson lick, it's an Alan Bybee lick. Anyway, so
I have some Doyle Lawson licks. I have some Sandbush. I even have a few Thiele licks. So I kind of mashed them all together.
It definitely sounds mashed. I can tell you.
Well, you take those licks and then you throw them down the stairs, and that's basically what Jeremy sounds like. A man on
takes
fire
a lick
falling
and keeps
downstairs.
on kicking. Am I right?
Yeah.
That's my style of playing.
Enough beating up Jeremy.
No. Wayne was a lot of fun. I enjoyed talking about some of his history. I love that he really articulated what this podcast is about and how much our whole story, the idea behind this is we understand how impactful music can be, and especially acoustic music. That's where we all came from in our roots.
Yep.
But just getting that first instrument as a kid or an adult, we have some, I love telling some students about our dad, Bill, that teaches banjo at the shop. He had a student that had wanted to play banjo his entire life, and his son finally brought him in at 97 years old and started banjo lessons. And this guy took lessons for 2 or 3 years before unfortunately passed on. But it was one of those things that has always been in the back of his mind that he wanted to be a musician, and he finally took that step.
You're never too old.
It's not just kids that it can change their life, but even at that farther stage of life, that music can be so impactful. And Wayne really articulated that well.
Yeah. It was inspiring to see that we had, when we had that fella coming into the shop all the time, and how much it changed his life, how much it changes young people's lives. He's seen it. We've seen it. I think everybody should take note of this and recognize that music is beyond just something that you put on in your car. It truly is a livelihood. It is part of who you are.
Like Wayne said, it's therapy. It's his place to get right.
There's not a whole lot of times when I put on, especially some of the older albums, where I don't remember a thing that happened, a pivotal point in my life, whether it's, I don't know. There's just a lot of things that always bring up that. So again, music, cool, huh?
Yep. And Wayne's cool for passing it on and teaching all these great new mandolin players and playing music live. Very active in making music.
Oh yeah, so it's awesome.
Making it happen.
That was exciting. I can't wait to see what our next guest is going to be, because all these have been fun and enlightening.
Ooh. That was your best NPR voice there, Jer.
I thought my first episode was my best.
Enlightening.
Enlightening.
Again, if you guys are enjoying the podcast, please rate it at any of the forums that you guys are doing
At
this
your
stuff?
It's in forums. Nobody's in forums, John. They're on platforms where people download and subscribe. If you haven't already, please subscribe.
See how this
Please
works is
give
it's
it
a
5
it's
stars.
a feed, an RSS feed that is hosted on a server at one place.
I don't know what you're
People
talking
either download or stream
understand.
the podcast.
This is
It's not on a
something
forum. It's not on the TV. It's not on a radio channel.
Can I get this on my car radio?
It depends on what channels you
Technically,
stream
yes.
to your radio.
Is it possible to see? Do you get this from the internet?
I guess technically it is on a radio channel if you're Bluetooth.
Is this on AM or FM channel?
No, it's on the Bluetooth channel.
Grandma.
The Bluetooth channel.
Do you guys have to type in www dot to see this? Or
Yes.
That's only 2 W's. You need a third.
Oh,
Get your
Anyway,
grandkids to
guys,
find
we
it
will
for
see
you,
you in the next episode where John learns to use a computer. That'll be a fun one.
Neato.
Hey, John's kid, can you download this episode from the forum for John so he can listen to it?
Get my programs.
Hear what a
Hey.
smart fella he sounds like?
Hey, Billy. Hey, Billy, I want to list up my programs.
Matlock's on pretty soon.
hey, by the way, does anybody figured out how to get the clock to stop bleeping on their
John?
on their VCR?
And this has been the rest of the story, John.
Take me away.
The Acoustic Shoppe Knows People, handmade by Trent Pruitt, Hinkley Hinkleston, and Jason Chapman for the Acoustic Shoppe.
Theme song written and performed by Ofer Koren.
And please remember to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.